Hey guys, good afternoon. Welcome to Primus Learning. My name is Primus Veku, and we're here again with another session. Remember, we told you this was going to be a series. This was going to be a series on how to grab your first IT job. And today, we'll be talking about solutions architects, how you need to prepare for your solutions architect interviews, for the AWS solutions architect interviews. So that is what we're talking about today. So guys, to prepare for an AWS solutions architect role and eventually get hired, it entails a lot of work. The first thing to understand is the AWS solutions architect role is very broad. It's very broad, and it's grown over time to include so many things, right? So the very first thing is that you have to understand that it is a role that is very generic. It's very broad. It includes different components of IT. And so you have to be an expert in different components of IT. And as such, it means you have to prepare to know what databases are all about. So you have to know what databases are all about. It's not about just knowing how to create a database or knowing how to scale a database or knowing how to do disaster recovery on databases. No, it's not about that. So to prepare for an AWS solutions architect interview, the first thing you need to do is you need to understand the general architecture, the general components of IT. Once you've understood the general components of IT, you have to learn how to make them to interact with each other. So they have to be able to interact with each other. Why do you need to know this? Because you'll be providing solutions to clients, and clients would have different tools. They will have different requirements. They will have different needs. And as such, you need to be able to go into their minds, figure out what the client needs, and be able to provide a solution in AWS for them, to build a solution in AWS for them, to architect a solution. Even if you're just designing the solution and not implementing it, and you have engineers or call it cloud engineers who do the implementation, you need to first of all understand that general architecture. Be able to provide an architecture diagram which relates the various services the client is talking about, which relates the various things, the various components. Maybe the client is working in one component, which is just the database component. You need to understand it fully to be able to provide guidance, to be able to guide them on what they need to do to get an optimal solution, to have a cost-effective solution, to have a scalable solution, to have a redundant solution, to have an available solution. So guys, to prepare for the solutions architect role, to fit these things, you need to understand some basic things. The very first thing is SQL. You will have to deal with databases as a solutions architect. Therefore, you cannot become a solutions architect without understanding SQL. You have to necessarily learn SQL. And SQL is simple. Go to W3 schools, go to different sites. SQL is the most simple thing you can ever imagine. It's the English language, and the syntax is as simple as that. Once you understand the English language, you are able to create tables. You understand how create statements work, how delete statements work, how joins work, how two different tables connect together. And as to be able to do that SQL, you need to understand what database concepts are, database management concepts. And so relational databases, the concept of relational databases, you have to understand and be able to reconcile that, right? And know that to be able to access a database, to be able to query a database, that's the language you will be learning, right? To be able to query a database, you need to understand the relationships that exist between the various components of that database. And so in relational databases, you need to learn how to query them, how they literally function. And there are different types of databases. You need to understand them because they will be asking you, hey, have you used Postgres? Have you used MariaDB? Have you used Oracle databases? Have you used different databases, right? And you need to understand the clients that you use to connect to those databases. And so what I'm saying is the first thing you need to learn as a solutions architect is to learn SQL and learn database management systems. Most especially relational database management systems. Those are the first things you need to put down and tick. Tick SQL first. The second thing you want to tick, is relational databases. Master relational database management systems. Once you've mastered those, you don't want to become a database administrator. No, it's about the whole components that make up a database that you want to understand. Learn and understand and read about them. Watch videos. There are so many good videos on YouTube about database management systems. Watch those ones. Once you've nailed those ones, you want to understand Python, guys. Most of the things that you'll be doing as an AWS solutions architect would necessitate you to understand how Python works, understand how to write simple scripting templates or scripts that would automate processes. And so you need Python. You need Python as a language to be able, to do those things. Most of your Lambda functions will be written in Python, and so you need to understand how they work. You need to also understand the concept of packages and libraries. Read about packages and libraries. Read about some of the most important Python libraries in AWS and packages. Boto3 is one of them. NumPy is one of them. So many others, right? There are so many others. Scikit-learn, there are just TensorFlow, there are just a lot of them. Some are data science specific, while some are really heavily used in AWS. Boto3, you cannot be a solutions architect without knowing how to use Boto3, without leveraging Boto3, because that's the library or the package that Python uses to communicate with AWS services through its API. It's basically an API that AWS leverages very well when it comes to Python. Or call it a CDK, I don't know, anyone, right? So you need to learn about those, learn about the important packages that you will leverage to be able to run your stuff, right? Once you've learned about those ones, so pandas and so on and so forth, those are the packages you need to learn. Understand Python, actually, Python structures, the basic structures of Python. Understand what loops are, understand what the basic syntax is, right? Understand if statement, conditional statements, understand the various functions in Python. Those things will help you be able to automate your processes, be able to write Lambda functions, be able to understand when you see a script, you understand what it is doing, because from time to time, you will need to do that. That's about the third thing you need to tick on your list of things that you're learning to become a good solutions architect. Once you've learned those, you need to learn networking. Learn general networking principles, the various layers of networking, right? The various protocols, network protocols. You have the 7 layers that are available. You have layers at different levels, transport layer, there are 7 layers, right? So you need to understand those layers and how packages move, from when you make an API call, what happens and all that. Of course, remember when you're defining your security groups, at times you need to open port 22. Why are you opening port 22? Right? Because SSH, you have to connect through SSH. There needs to be a flow of traffic through a protocol, through that port number that you're opening. Why are you opening that? Once you learn networking, the various layers of networking, or various layers of a networking protocol, you understand why you're opening the security groups, when you're opening them, and of course, how you open them, right? How traffic moves. Once you learn them, it makes an impact on you even when you're creating your VPCs, because once you're creating your VPCs, you will now understand why you're creating a VPC, why you're giving IP addresses, an IP address range, why the CIDR block is the way it is. So guys, you need to necessarily learn networking. And so when you learn networking in general, and you are applying it into AWS while creating virtual private networks or virtual private clouds, it becomes easy for you. you've mastered networking, and so it becomes easy for you to understand how to create a VPC, why you're even creating a VPC, how things flow in AWS. Once you've understood that component, so once you're doing this, you are relating them back to AWS. On the database side, remember I told you to learn SQL and learn database management systems, right? In that case, when you learn them in their general principles and all that, you need to relate it back to AWS by creating, that's the hands-on part, guys, by creating RDS instances. It could be Postgre instances, it could be MariaDB, MySQL, and so many others in AWS. So create them, see how they function, see the availability part of it, see how you can scale them, and so on and so forth. And use the language, the SQL that you're learning, to query them, to connect through a client. Like you could have a SQL Workbench client, you could have SQL Actron client, and so many other clients. Use them to connect to those databases and query them. Use them to connect to Redshift. Redshift is another Postgre. It has a Postgres database engine. So use them, create databases, create a Redshift cluster, and connect to them and query data. Even use the data, the tables that you're creating through the SQL you learned, create tables in there, query those tables, play with them. And that's how you become used to the concept. And when you're designing a general architecture and they're talking about the database component, they're talking about the server component, you begin to understand. So once you've learned those parts, guys, that's preparing for the AWS Solutions Architect interview. And guys, hey, please click on our subscribe button and leave us comments. Tell us what you think about these. Let us help you land that first job. All right. So what's the next thing to tick when you're preparing for an AWS Solutions Architect interview? The next thing to tick is you want to learn about let's call it, you want to learn about servers in general. Let's call it servers in general. So you have to learn about how the application part works, right? You have to understand how applications work. So let's say you want to deploy, they give you code now to deploy an application. How will you deploy an application in AWS? So you need to learn how to deploy an application in a server. The server could be an EC2 instance. It could be any other cluster, like a Kubernetes cluster. And so you need to learn a little bit of how to deploy stuff in AWS servers, in Kubernetes, in ECS. All of those use servers under the hood. All of those use EC2 instances under the hood. And so that's why when you create an EKS cluster or an Elastic Kubernetes service cluster, it has nodes. Those nodes are basic, simple EC2 instances. So you want to understand how those work and what are the components, what makes up an EC2 instance, what is a load balancer, what is auto scaling. You want to understand the underlying things. You want to understand the underlying structure of those things. Once you've understood them, you are able to apply it in AWS. The next thing you need to tick to become a good solutions architect is to learn Terraform or CloudFormation. Learn infrastructure as code. It will help you be able to deploy stuff quickly. Once you've learned that, your life becomes very easy when you're creating resources. Sometimes you see us creating resources. If you watch our other videos, we do them from the console, right? And we tell you how, no, this is a manual process, it's slow. The same thing that you're doing on the console for 1 hour or 20 minutes, you could do it with a script for 5 seconds or 10 seconds or 20 seconds. So learn Terraform. Terraform is what I recommend, and it's very good in the market. One last thing I want to recommend, learn CI/CD pipelines. Most organizations now deploy their infrastructure using CI/CD pipelines. Learn it. GitHub Actions is your big boy. Learn GitHub Actions, guys. So many videos out there about GitHub Actions. I've made a lot of videos on GitHub Actions. Just visit my YouTube channel. You should be able to see videos on what GitHub Actions is all about, how it's used. Learn Jenkins and learn any other CI/CD pipeline tools, that are available out there, guys. This is really, really important, because the infrastructure that you deploy, the architecture design that you deploy needs to be built out, and it needs to be built out with infrastructure as code. Why? Because it needs to be updated, and you can't go in and manually be updated. It's a whole lot of things, right? You want to have everything controlled by infrastructure as code, Terraform or CloudFormation at least, so that you don't go in and you're manually creating things. How long will you take to manually create an account and resources for a big client? It doesn't work that way. If you have 200 AWS accounts to manage or 20 AWS accounts to create infrastructure inside, it won't help you to create it manually. These are basic things that I expect every solutions architect that I'm interviewing to be able to tell me when I'm discussing with them. So guys, take your time. I always tell people, apply for 50 jobs a day. As you're applying for those 50 jobs, study for 2 hours a day. It will take you 30 minutes or 35 minutes to apply for those jobs using LinkedIn, Indeed, Dice, whatever. And once you've applied, study for 2 hours every day. And if you plan these things out, you can study all of these things in less than 3 months and become very good at it if you put 2 hours every day. And so it doesn't just mean just reading. It means studying and practicing, doing hands-on practicals, taking some of the YouTube videos that we're doing. There are a lot of videos and YouTube videos out there on particular things. Take, for instance, today or this week, I'm studying about SQL. There are so many videos on free code camp, on SQL, just on SQL, on relational database management systems, on CI/CD pipelines, on infrastructure as code, on Terraform, on CI/CD pipelines. Guys, pick up these things and learn them. Once you've learned them and it becomes a part of you, you become a solid person. When you're discussing them, somebody would see in you somebody who a person who understands the relationship between IT components. And take note, security is absolutely important. Once you're designing a solution, always mention security. They will ask you your design strategies when you're you're hired for this job and you're asked to design a solution. What will be your design pattern and so on and so on. That's a question they can ask you. Make sure you talk of availability. Make sure you talk of scalability. Make sure you talk of security. Security is most important. Any data that's moving from place to place, it has to be encrypted. So that is encryption in transit. There should be data encryption at rest as well. Data that is stored in a location needs to be encrypted. So once you're designing your solution, it has to take care of encryption, and you have to mention it in your interviews, guys. And also take note of the fact that it has to be scalable. How do you maintain scalability? You maintain scalability through auto scaling or the tools that you use. For instance, EKS, if you're deploying EC2 instances, auto scaling. If you're deploying databases, you know how to manage that and all of those concepts. And of course, storage. If you're deploying stuff in S3, you know that S3 is very, very, very scalable. You can scale up to whatever you want, but you have to design it correctly. If you're designing a database, a data lake, you have to design it correctly. Same thing applies to DevOps engineers, guys. If you are studying to become a DevOps engineer and to take DevOps interviews, I've been interviewing for many years now for some of the clients I work with or some of the big organizations I work with. And so I know exactly what I'm telling you. You have to study these things. You have to know them. You have to master them. You have to be a master, such that when you're talking of the use case, your use case should be what you've practiced, and you can speak it out as though you're when you get up from your sleep. And so, guys, if you are preparing to become a DevOps engineer, you need to study 2 hours a day. And what are the things you're studying? I've mentioned some. CI/CD pipelines, most important one for you. You have to understand even how Jira bots work, right? How Jira works. You need to understand how Jira works. It's based on it. There are videos on YouTube. So you have to understand project management, you have to understand CI/CD pipelines, you have to understand those tools, be able to use Docker, be able to use, because you build images, push them to Docker Hub or push them to ECR. ECR is AWS repository for images. So you have to learn how to build an image using Docker and push it out there. You know, your Docker file. If you watch our videos, you will see how we're building an image and we're pushing them to ECR or Docker Hub and so on and so forth. You need to learn how to do that. You need to learn how to deploy stuff in Kubernetes using pipelines, and also manually. You have to learn how to manually roll out things, to debug, how to debug stuff using EKS CTL or so and so on and so forth, right? You have to learn how to do that, or kubectl, sorry. You have to learn how to do that. Even learn how to create a cluster using EKS CTL. Very important. And there are little neat tools that help you to be able to become a better DevOps engineer. Linux is absolutely important to become a DevOps engineer because you've been working with commands. Please study your Linux. Take time, study Linux like you want to become a Linux expert. It's absolutely important for you. Study shell scripting, study Python for you who wants to become a good DevOps engineer. Also, one of the things you need to take into consideration are the AWS tools for DevOps. Sometimes we forget those ones. Code deploy, code pipeline, code commit, and so on and so forth. Please study those ones. Become a master also in Git. That's something you have to tick. Git and GitHub. Git is the version control system, while GitHub is simply the repository. Could be Bitbucket, could be Azure, whatever, Azure pipelines, and so on, Azure, whatever, repositories, and so on and so forth. So guys, please study these things very well. They will help you in your interviews as you prepare for your interviews and as you tackle your interviews. Be bold in your interviews. Remember, we've talked about how to answer the question, tell me about yourself. We'll be dwelling on that every time we discuss, but be bold when you're answering that question, because you want to simply share your experience with the interviewer. Some interviewers come in there just to give you the job, just to discuss with you. You can scare them away by just being timid, afraid, talking, and you're not loud, people don't hear you, and you're just timid, and come in, talk, discuss with them, discuss from the point of view, the things you've worked on. If they discover that you've not worked on what they want, they will not hire you. If they discover that, hey, you have experience on what they want, they will hire you. So guys, please put in the time, put in the work, and study, become a master of your stuff, and you will love your job. You will love to become a DevOps engineer. You will love to become a solutions architect. So this is what we had for you today, guys. This is a series. We'll continue to do videos on how to prepare for interviews, or how to take interviews to become AWS solutions architects, DevOps engineers, data engineers, and so on and so forth. Thanks for listening. This is Primus Learning. My name is Primus Veku, and you can reach out to us. Go to our website at primuslearning.org, or contact us at contact@primuslearning.org, or reach out to me directly on WhatsApp at 240-486-1313. It was a pleasure being here. Please don't forget to subscribe, share our channel with your friends, and also leave us comments to let us know how you see our videos. And thank you for watching. Bye-bye.